the interview that changed everything. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Morrison Industries, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Sarah Martinez smoothed down her best white blouse for the third time, her fingers trembling slightly as she held her daughter Emma's small hand. The reception area was pristine and intimidating, all glass and chrome, with the kind of furniture that whispered of success and power. Emma, barely 4 years old, sat quietly beside her mother on the sleek leather chair. Her yellow dress, carefully chosen for this important day, stood out like a ray of sunshine in the sterile corporate environment. The little girl's curly blonde hair caught the light as she swung her legs back and forth, too short to reach the floor. Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this interview. The position as executive assistant to the CEO of Morrison Industries represented everything she had been working toward since her husband's death 2 years ago. The salary would finally allow her to move out of her mother's cramped apartment and give Emma the stability she deserved. The receptionist, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper tone, had already made it clear that children were not welcome in this professional space. Her disapproving glances cut through Sarah like knives, each look a reminder of how out of place they seemed in this world of business suits and important meetings. "Mrs. Martinez," the receptionist called out, her voice crisp and unwelcoming. "I've spoken with Mr. Harrison, the Human Resources Director. He's quite concerned about your situation." She gestured vaguely toward Emma, who was now quietly humming to herself while examining the pattern on her dress. Sarah's heart began to race. She had called ahead, explaining her circumstances, and had been assured that bringing Emma would not be a problem. Her regular babysitter had fallen through at the last minute, and her mother was working a double shift at the hospital. There had been no other choice. "I understand his concern," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the panic building in her chest. "Emma will be very quiet during the interview. She's been practicing sitting still all week." The receptionist's expression remained cold and unyielding. "Mr. Harrison feels that bringing a child to a job interview shows poor judgment and a lack of professionalism. He questions whether you can maintain appropriate boundaries between your personal and professional life." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had worked so hard to get to this point, sending out hundreds of resumes, surviving 3 rounds of phone interviews, all while caring for Emma and managing their small household. The thought of losing this opportunity because of circumstances beyond her control was devastating. Emma looked up at her mother, sensing the tension in the air. Her bright blue eyes were filled with concern, and she reached out to take Sarah's hand. "Mama, are you sad?" she asked in a whisper. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand gently, drawing strength from the simple gesture. "No, sweetheart, Mama's just thinking." Around them, the office continued its busy rhythm. Well-dressed employees moved through the space. With purpose, their conversations a low murmur of important-sounding business terms and urgent deadlines. Sarah felt increasingly out of place, like an intruder in a world where she desperately wanted to belong. The receptionist returned to her desk, clearly considering the matter closed. She picked up her phone and began dialing, presumably to cancel Sarah's interview officially. The sound of the numbers being pressed seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet waiting area. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of disappointment settling on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. She thought about the bills, waiting at home, the notices from the landlord, Emma's upcoming school registration that she couldn't afford. This job had represented hope, a chance to build something better for both of them. Just as the receptionist was about to speak into the phone, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A man in an expensive navy suit stepped out, moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. He was perhaps in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and an air of authority that seemed natural rather than forced. The receptionist immediately hung up the phone and straightened in her chair. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison," she said, her entire demeanor transforming into one of eager professionalism. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was James Morrison, the CEO himself. She had studied his biography extensively, preparing for questions about the company's history and values. but seeing him in person was different somehow. Despite his obvious success and power, there was something approachable about him, something that put her slightly at ease. Mr. Morrison paused as he noticed Sarah and Emma sitting in the waiting area. His gaze lingered on the little girl, and something in his expression softened. Emma, unaware of who this important man was, smiled up at him with the innocent friendliness that came so naturally to children. "Good morning," Mr. Morrison said, addressing them both. His voice was warm and genuine. "I don't believe we've met." Before the receptionist could intervene, Sarah stood up, instinctively smoothing Emma's dress and her own skirt. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. I'm Sarah Martinez. I have an interview scheduled this morning for the executive assistant position." "Ah, yes," he said, nodding thoughtfully. "And this beautiful young lady must be your daughter." Emma, emboldened by his kind tone, spoke up. "I'm Emma. I'm 4 years old, and I know how to sit very quietly during important meetings." Her serious tone and grown-up words brought a genuine smile to Mr. Morrison's face. "I can see that," he replied. "You're doing an excellent job of it right now." The receptionist cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Mr. Morrison, I was just explaining to Mrs. Martinez that we have policies about children in the workplace during interviews. Mr. Harrison felt it would be inappropriate to proceed under these circumstances." Mr. Morrison's expression grew thoughtful as he studied Sarah's face. She could see him taking in the careful way she was dressed, the pride mixed with desperation in her eyes, the protective way she stood near her daughter. "Tell me, Mrs. Martinez," he said quietly, "what happened to your usual childcare arrangement?" Sarah felt a flush of embarrassment, but forced herself to meet his gaze directly. "My babysitter had a family emergency, and my mother is working a double shift at the hospital where she's a nurse. I called ahead to make sure bringing Emma would be acceptable. I understand it's not ideal, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity." "And you've been preparing Emma to accompany you to professional settings?" "Yes, sir. We've practiced sitting quietly using inside voices, and she brought coloring books to keep herself occupied. I know it's not conventional, but sometimes single. Parents have to make unconventional choices." Mr. Morrison nodded slowly, his eyes moving between Sarah and Emma. The little girl had returned to examining the interesting patterns in the marble floor, completely unaware that her presence was causing such a stir among the adults. "Mrs. Martinez," Mr. Morrison said finally, "I'd like to conduct your interview myself if you're amenable to that. And, Miss Emma," he addressed the little girl directly, "would you like to see my office? I have some very interesting books about, animals that I think you might enjoy." Emma's face lit up with excitement, but she looked to her mother for permission before responding. Sarah felt a surge of pride at her daughter's good manners, even as she struggled to process what was happening. "That would be wonderful, Mr. Morrison," Sarah managed to say. "Thank you for your understanding." As they walked toward the elevator, Mr. Morrison fell into step beside them. "You know," he said conversationally, "I was raised by a single mother. Myself. She used to bring me to her job interviews when necessary. One employer told her that bringing a child showed a lack of seriousness about work." "What happened?" Sarah asked, curious despite her nervousness. "She got a different job with a company that valued her honesty and her dedication to both her work and her family. That company recognized that someone who could manage the challenges of single parenthood probably had exactly the kind of organizational skills and determination they were looking for in an employee." They stepped into the elevator, and Emma pressed herself against the glass wall, marveling at the view of the city below. Mr. Morrison watched her with an expression of gentle amusement. "Emma," he said, "do you know what your mother does for work?" "She helps people get organized and make sure important things don't get forgotten," Emma replied seriously. "She's very good at remembering everything, even my stuffed animal's birthday." Mr. Morrison glanced at Sarah with raised eyebrows. "Attention to detail and memory for important dates. Those sound like excellent qualifications for an executive assistant." The interview that followed was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Mr. Morrison's office was indeed filled with interesting books, and Emma settled happily in a comfortable chair with a picture book about elephants. She kept her promise to be quiet, only occasionally looking up to share an excited whisper about something she had discovered in the pictures. As Sarah answered questions about her experience and her vision for the role, she found herself relaxing. Mr. Morrison's questions were thoughtful and probing, but they were asked with genuine interest rather than judgment. He seemed to understand that her experience as a Singh